Hello, everybody. Welcome back. You may be asking, why am I wearing this mask? Let me give you a hint. That's right. We're here with Kara Goldin, one of the original generation of disruptor brand founders. Really, really pleased to have her. Kara is the founder and the CEO of Hint Beverages, pioneering beverage company. We have a lot to talk about with Kara. She's also an author, too, of the recently published autobiography and really business guidance book, Undaunted, about her history of launching Hint Water. Kara, thank you for being with us. And I should point out, we're actually live. This is a live conversation. So if people have questions, we might be able to get them into the chat and throw one or two your way. But thank you so much for being with us. Let me dive right in with you, Kara, because I want to use the time really productively. One of the industry themes that we've been highlighting this year at the IAB Brand Disruption Summit, and it was really featured in the research we released earlier this morning, is the advance of what had originally been direct-to-consumer brands into brick-and-mortar retail. That's been a very big movement just over the past year. Now, you have been omni-channel from the start, as I recall. You didn't think really in terms of, oh, we're just going to do this DTC, or I'm going to roll out into stores. You did it all at once. And I'm wondering if you can give us a bit of a walk through that journey. You know, why did you decide to go all in, literally omni in at once? And what were the challenges and opportunities that you encountered working across channels from the beginning?
Well, thank you so much for having me, first of all. And what a great question. I don't know if I can answer it entirely, but basically, you know, when we started Hint, it was over 16 years ago, which I guess you could say Rome wasn't built in a day, right? It's a long time ago that we started Hint. And you know, I came from tech. I was running AOL's direct-to-consumer partnerships and retail partnerships prior to actually starting Hint. But when we originally had this idea to go and take an industry that wasn't traditionally direct-to-consumer, it wasn't that I thought that it actually could be direct-to-consumer tomorrow. I started with the traditional way, getting our product into retail stores. And there was this new store that had just opened in San Francisco called Whole Foods. And I thought, if there's any place where my idea would be originally, it wasn't my idea to actually go start a company yet. I just wanted to purchase this product, which was an unsweetened flavored water. I had no idea that I was launching an entirely new category in the beverage industry. So for anyone who's launched a new category within an industry, you know what I'm talking about and how long it takes, consumer acceptance, all of those things. So got it into Whole Foods, which is called specialty retail. And then it took us a few years to actually even be acknowledged to potentially get it on the shelf at a big retailer like a Target or a Kroger. And we sort of went a little bit kind of sideways, again, by accident, and got it into the tech offices. So originally, Google's offices. Google was actually a little secret here. A guy named Omid Kordestani was trying to hire me to come and work at Google. And he knew I had taken a few years off and said, hey, you know, why don't you come and talk to me about this job? And after a while, I said, you know, I don't know if I should admit this to you or not, but I'm starting this beverage company. And he kind of chuckled and he said, that's great. And he said, maybe we need some of this inside our Google offices. So I thank Omid for making that original bottle in the micro kitchens happen. But little did I know, just with that lunch with Omid, that we would soon become the only beverage inside of Google for 2 years. Can you imagine? Like there was no other choices inside of Google for the first couple of years.
I have to interrupt you here because I mean the implication is that being the only beverage inside of Google kind of gave you a hip factor at the very beginning of the company. But in order to be hip, that somehow has to be communicated. So how did you how if at all were you able to take advantage of the Omid's graciousness in getting you in there?
Well, it was funny because Google was growing so quickly that we just kind of jumped on board, and they were growing. Believe it or not, Google had a lot of other things on their plate to think about and worry about. And so they just wanted us to be able to keep up with demand and stock the micro kitchens within all of these facilities. And so we said, sure. We even had a couple of employees that actually worked inside of Google and who like all they did was merchandise these refrigerators for a couple of years. I mean, it was somewhat crazy and totally counter to what we would potentially be up against inside of some of these large mainstream grocery stores. But what was fascinating about this relationship with Google was that was kind of the beginning of the omni-channel, right? Where we call it corporate food service and that whole account. And that's continued to grow outside of Silicon Valley, outside of Google, into Facebook and lots of other companies and big banks all over the US as well. But because there was almost like a pull strategy at this point where many of these employees, they would find this cool product, right? It had this cachet, like you could only find it inside of our offices. And then they would go into their local store and say, do you have this product hint? And the grocery buyers would say, wait, what is it? I've never seen this stuff before. And so they would start calling us, which is just a dream, right? You have grocery buyers who are calling you.
Well, you created the pull. You created the pull through the Silicon Valley corporate connection. But it's kind of interesting. Would you ever have thought about that consciously? That you could use that as the corporate accounts as a pull for the retail? That's interesting.
Never. And then what would happen was, unfortunately, a lot of these grocery stores, some of them would react quickly, but many of them would take a little bit longer. They'd have to run it up the ladder. They would have to figure out whether or not there was a category called unsweetened flavored water in their planogram before they could actually make a decision whether or not to put it on the shelf. So we would get phone calls from Facebook executives saying to us, I want to have this product at home. Can I order some of your product? And so this was the early days of direct to consumer for us. We knew how to ship a box, right? I had lived that life when I was at America Online, but we hadn't really thought about it from a large scale consumer because of the weight of the box. We thought, in order to scale this, we've really got to figure out a relationship where this ultimately makes sense. So we continued to kind of be on demand for the consumers that would call us. We weren't going out of our way, but we really wanted to satisfy the consumers.
But don't drop that thread because it's really interesting. So you start out in your earliest days, you are shipping boxes. You're shipping boxes to corporate accounts. You're calling on some grocery accounts, but pretty quickly, it's individuals are coming to you and say, hey, can I get this delivered to my home? How do you then, because there are a lot of people in this audience today who are facing exactly the same thing. How did you kind of cross that initial chasm and figure out things like the unit economics of delivery to the home? And because you don't want the opportunity to pass, you want to grab the opportunity, but if you do it wrong, it could kill you. So how did you build that bridge?
Well, we actually waited a little bit because we thought, this world of grocery has not really arrived yet. And it wasn't until Amazon grocery really hit that the consumer started the phone calls started to pick up. And we ended up getting a phone call. I talk about this in my book, sort of by accident, from Amazon saying, hey, we'd love to have your product in Amazon grocery. I thought, okay, let's see what happens here. Maybe this is another Jeff Bezos idea that goes away really quickly. You know, he has a few of those where he starts things and then they go away. And I wasn't sure whether or not it was going to work or not, but pretty quickly we became one of the top products in Amazon grocery. And it was a couple of months down the road where the buyer for Amazon grocery said, you know, what's so interesting about your product? And I said, what's that? He said that the consumer who is buying your product is crossing over into other categories and buying things like diabetes monitors, things that really say that this consumer wants health, wants to stay healthy. And I think that's really fascinating. And I said, oh, interesting. Can you give me the emails? Because I'd really like to reach out to some of those people. And they said, no, you know, there's no way we're going to give you those emails. So that was the moment when I thought, okay, I've got this opportunity over here with my consumers that are calling me, but on the other hand, Amazon is telling me that it's much more valuable. And so that was the moment when I really started to think about, even if we have to figure out a way to figure out the unit economics, how do we do that so that we can capture this consumer and really figure out ways to make them buy more? That's when Amazon then shared with us that this consumer is also subscribing. And so the more that they knew that that consumer stuck, that added to the lifetime value of this consumer, and that they could figure out that maybe the cost initially was X, but as long as they bought so many cases. So they started to unravel the economics for me. And that's when we actually went to FedEx. And at the time, Amazon was shipping all of their stuff through UPS or USPS. And we went to FedEx and we said, listen, we are going to stay on Amazon. There's going to be consumers that go over here, but we want to start our own thing because we've got over 20 flavors and we want a good deal because it's heavy. But here's what we'll do. We will only do it and offer sort of a better economics for this consumer if you guys tell us that there's a certain weight that we need to, you know, have the parameters around. So basically it's 3 cases for us. So if a consumer is buying 3 cases, they're going to get free shipping from us. But otherwise, if you're going to buy less than that, if you're not subscribing, then we figured out that it's going to cost more. In order
but it's interesting because you're basically saying the seminal point here was Amazon told you that you were a data company, which is another big theme of the work that we've been doing over the years here. And so there's an aha moment there. And there's another aha moment that says, we're not only a data company, but if we can work it, we're a subscription-based data company. 2 things that wouldn't naturally occur to you when you're starting out with the idea for the product itself.
Yeah, and that was the thing. I mean, look, we were getting lots of little data points, not just from Amazon, but just as another example, Google employees were reaching out to us and saying, hey, we love your product. And there was this thing called hint hoarding that was going on inside of Google. And it was, people would talk about this. And I mean, we just kind of laughed. We said, oh, what is hint hoarding? And people would get really fired up about it. And they'd say, well, you know, in our refrigerators, they don't restock them fast enough. And I mean, I need to drink like 6 or 7 of these a day. And, you know, is there any way you can talk to Google for me about, you know, I mean, these are employees, they're working at Google. Like we're laughing about this concept. So, but we started to hear this metric that there were clearly, sadly, consumers at Google who were not or I should say employees at Google who were not drinking hint, but the consumers that were consuming hint at Google were drinking 6 to 7 a day. Now, 12 packs, right? That means that you want to have this available for you much more than, maybe, a can of Coke, right? I mean, you talk to anybody at any of the large soda companies, just as an example, they would salivate at the idea of having a consumer that is going to drink 6 to 7 a day. I mean, it's almost impossible to drink 6 to 7 Red Bulls a day.
No,
right?
well, you probably kill. Well, I don't want to say it, but it would literally make your head explode if you did that. But you were sitting in this wonderful position where they're kind of pushed back, the traditional beverage companies, by several decades of health information. You're embracing the health movement, and so you're kind of walking straight into this welcoming environment which says, hey, the more of this you drink, the better it actually is for you because it's water.
Yeah, and there's a scarcity side of it too, where people had seen inside of their workplace that there wasn't going to be enough. So every morning people would go and grab their hints and hide them underneath the desk. Can you imagine? I mean, I would love to hear that that this happened to some other beverage. I mean, there was a whole, it's not just Google either. I mean, there was a whole conversation a few years ago at Twitter, and anyone who worked at Twitter will share with you that there were some engineers that quit when they finally decided that they weren't going to have hint in the micro kitchens anymore. I mean, there was just this phenomenon that went on that was insane. Did we plan on that? No.
At what point, it's kind of a two-parter. I'll ask you both at the same time. Part one is at what point did the growth curve really begin to, it's almost like the scaled growth curve, because the growth curve, I know, was pretty robust from the beginning. But at a certain point, the production demands, actually the consumer demand started growing very significantly. What point was that? And I guess the second part of the question is, where are you now in the balance among, say, wholesale, the corporate side, your original and the direct-to-consumer side? Where's that shape up now?
Yeah, I mean, look, we've continued to grow over the years. I always love it when I see early plans where you say, I grew 100%. Well, it's great. I mean, to go from whatever, $100 to $200, right? You've grown 100%, but it's, we've continued to grow throughout the years. And I think more than anything, we've continued to try to grow in lots of different channels. So whenever we've seen that corporate food service, these offices start to get up too big in our mind, then we start to figure out how can we make retail move a little faster in some way, and we start to really focus. And that, I think, speaks to the omni-channel brand, is that you never allow one to just kind of overtake, and you really throw this back to the consumer, because I don't think retail is going away. I think people still enjoy going out and having that experience. We know firsthand that even as the pandemic hit and our direct-to-consumer business was, getting close to 40% of our overall business, we then brought on Costco throughout the U.S. They reached out to us because we do everything in the U.S. They didn't have to deal with any issues of shortages of cans and things that were actually being produced in Asia. They couldn't get to the U.S. So that business, when we brought on Costco, we started hearing from consumers say, I'm a subscriber to Hint, but I love the fact that you have a variety pack at Costco. They're still walking into Costco. They see something there. Maybe it's a, blueberry lemon that I'm holding up here that they didn't for whatever see online, and they're going to purchase it, right? That it's a good price in their mind, and they just decide it's an impulse buy.
So you don't see much channel conflict on the demand side itself, that consumers who subscribe to you are actually still buying in the stores?
1,000%. And I think that that's the thing. I mean, we do things online to try and encourage consumers that maybe have purchased from us. Maybe, they've moved and then they've decided to sign off. We'll go and target them with maybe something like a smash up, which is we'll take blueberry and lemon or two flavors and put them together and try and see whether or not we can get that consumer back into purchasing from us. And, our subscription rates for our consumers online are just shy of 70% of our consumers who are buying from us online are subscribing.
Oh, that's a lot.
A lot, right?
Kara, another question on channel conflict that I think, again, everybody in the audience is either dealing with directly or thinking about. With such large wholesale partners as Costco and Amazon, has there been any challenges in managing them? I mean, you want to sell direct, you want the data that enables you to get, obviously, more of the profits returned to Hint on that basis, but they help you scale. How do you manage? How do you negotiate with wholesale partners around you maintaining your D2C business while also maintaining the wholesale business with them?
Yeah, well, I think more than anything, we've proven it out. I mean, look, I saw it at America Online over and over again. While I didn't have my own products when I was working at America Online, I saw many retailers like J. Crew and The Gap and lots of people who had other channels, whether that was a catalog and a store. And this consumer, I believed back then that this consumer decides. Today, it is clearer than ever that the consumer decides how and when they're going to purchase. So your job as a retailer, and I speak for myself when I'm acting as the retailer, is figure out how do you satisfy the consumer to get them to purchase, right? I'm never going to win running up against Amazon, for example, on price, right? They can beat me out every single day. And that holds true for a Costco or a Walmart or Sam's Club or anybody else who's out there. But it's their job to merchandise and to price it appropriately, because the consumer decides where they want to purchase something. And if you don't have a different product, if you don't have a different, in our product category, case pack, where something different that is offered to that consumer that is going into that retailer, then the consumer won't see a reason to purchase from you. And I think that that's the thing that you have to remember. It's not brain surgery. It is really understanding the head of the consumer and how they think about where they're going to purchase things. And I think that, there's always going to be people that are going to look at retail, walk into retailers because they enjoy that experience and they have to purchase other things from those products. But if you today do not have a strategy that really shows the consumer that you're out there and this is what you're doing and there's something a little bit unique in what you're doing online or what you're doing at Costco or Walmart or whatever it is, then you'll lose this consumer because they'll start comparing the two.
Another thing that we've been talking a lot about, we talked about this morning already, was in the research, is also something that you represent with Hint, and that's expansion into other categories. And I've been very intrigued because, one of Hint's most salient characteristics is you began with a mission. Health was a mission. How did you resist it's another two-parter, Kara. It's like, on the one hand, part one, how did you resist the temptation to deviate from that mission? and just become kind of a generic beverage company or extend into other areas. But the second part is you now have extended into sunscreen and deodorant. These wouldn't necessarily seem to be logical extensions. So I'm just wondering, on the one hand, well, it's really the same question. It's how did you figure out how you stay with the mission and deviate just enough to grow the company rather than damage it in the long run?
Well, I think you touched on the North Star word, which is mission. I never started Hint to start a beverage company. I started it to solve a problem. And I knew my why from the beginning was it had a purpose, it had a mission, which was to help consumers get healthier. And so when I was looking for a sunscreen a few years ago, not actually thinking of it as a brand extension for Hint, I couldn't find a sunscreen that I wanted to wear, that was clear, that smelled great. And unlike some entrepreneurs that are out there, I find the holes in the market. I don't go and copy another product. I go and find the holes that are in the market and figure out. I try and get everyone else to go build my product. Talk to a few people out there. I give the ideas away constantly. I'm like, you should go do this, really. And if you don't do it, then I say, you know what? I'm going to just go do this because it just seems so obvious for me. But more than anything, when I started to think about why this was so obvious, I started to think about my consumer. And very interesting about our consumer, they were also reaching out to me once they had been drinking Hint. These same people were reaching out to me saying, hey, what kind of potato chips do you eat? What kind of sunscreen do you wear? What kind?
They felt they had a personal relationship with the company and with you as the founder.
Totally. They wanted to have this dialogue with me, and sometimes by email, sometimes calling our customer service department, but often on social. I'm very active on social. I mean, it's interesting how often people are asking me for recommendations on different categories because they feel that I'm in it. I'm like, deodorant is a very different category than water, but they're like, yeah, but you're in that whole world that exists out there. Which one would you use? And so that's what made me start to think that this consumer really needs help figuring out what is healthy and what isn't healthy, which goes back to our mission for Hint. And so why can't we actually be the halo that helps consumers to get and stay healthy?
You know, you just like led me to this moment of aha, because we've done, again, over the years, lots of research about social as a sales venue, the role of creators and influencers, all of that. But you're also talking about the founder and the CEO as an avatar, for the consumers. And that's another thing that's been enabled by the internet itself as a platform and the platforms within the internet, for you to, in effect, be and serve as an avatar on things that aren't necessarily directly part of what your company does, but now does do.
Yeah, and I think for me personally, it's not just about me sharing opinions or letting people know exactly what we're doing at Hint. It really is two-way. So I share with many other executives that have talked to me about being on Twitter, for example. I mean, the amount of information that I get from consumers about what they're looking for, it's exciting. It's trend spotting. It's better than any focus group out there because you really start to gauge what people are thinking about. And sometimes you think, well, that's not what I want to be thinking about at all. But yet you see the problems very, very clearly without even asking. And I guess, as Steve Jobs used to say over and over again, don't ask the consumer, just show them. And so for me, it's this market of being able to really have that relationship where you're hearing from the consumers something about what their needs are.
Kara, I know you have to run. I want to ask you one last question. We're asking all the founders that we're showcasing over the next 3 days this. What's the one thing that you know now, 16 years after the founding of Hint, what's the one thing you know now that you wish you could tell yourself back then when you were starting out?
Yeah, I'd say that the closer you can pay attention to the consumer, and that is the mecca, right? That don't ever move too far away from this consumer. Continue to figure out who this consumer is and watch them change, and you'll be okay.
Great. Well, Kara Goldin, thank you so much for being here on the first morning of the 2021 IEB Brand Disruption Summit. It is fantastic to have you with us. The Hint Beverage story is a remarkable, the Hint Inc. story is a remarkable story. I really encourage everybody to read the book Undaunted and to get the mask. Take the hint. Thanks so much, Kara.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.